tool, strategy, whatever you want to call it. So our internet here on this nice, beautiful morning, sun's out, like very few clouds in the sky, has decided to go out on us. So right now we are going to be broadcasting from this bad boy right here. And let's see. I mean, you know what, Sarah? They can put a man on the moon and time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second. Let's see if my iPhone supports this live event with us.
Let's
So,
see. I mean, crazy things have happened.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. And now that it's plugged in, hopefully we got direct access and we're good to go. So today, everyone, is a very special HPLS podcast. We bring you Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I keep mixing those two up, so I got it right. Perfect. Sarah's host of Let's Talk Supply Chain and CEO of ShipZees. So what we are going to talk about today is we're going to talk about transparency in your supply chain. We're going to talk about data. We're going to talk about authenticity, and we're going to talk about the industry as a whole. So Sarah, to kick this off, when you're going into companies, when you're having conversations, what are the top two primary things you must have going into these or coming out of these meetings in order to continue the sales process moving forward?
Well, I think going into it, you need to have your listening hat on. I mean, we really, and he's just left. So I am
No,
live all by myself. Are you there?
no, I'm
There
still
we go.
here. I just
Okay,
made you full screen.
so you need to go in with your listening hat on, because the only way that you can really move forward and address any of the pain points is to really understand from their point of view what they're going through, what their challenges are, and then really dig deep into what the solutions could be. And then again, you need to know what their pain points are. So really coming out of that conversation and having a true understanding of what goes on a day-to-day basis, what their pain points are, so that you can then again come back with the right solutions.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. Welcome to the HPLS podcast.
Oh, there we go. I had to hide again. There we go. I just like the intro so much. I wanted to play it twice.
I like it too. I mean, it's catchy. It grabs your attention.
I like the eye part where it kind of glistens. To me, that was kind of the seller when it was created. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Sarah. I think as my perception of it, and love to hear your thoughts. So many salespeople make it so much more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know if it's we initially, and I put myself into that category because I'm constantly saying, how can I simplify this? Brian Byro, a coach of mine and a dear friend, always said, use the KISS theory, keep it simple, superstar. And
superstar.
yeah, you like how a little twist, eh? Absolutely. And I've often asked myself as I go into, there's actually two questions I ask myself. The first question is, before I do any task, before I make any connection, before I organize any meeting, before I make any call, is this getting me closer or further away from my goals, my dreams, my ambitions, my desires? And if the answer is it's getting me closer, the next thing I always ask myself is like, how can I simplify this? Is there a way to, and not necessarily a shortcut? It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking simplify. So if it's an A, B, C, D, E process, is there any way we can knock two processes out by streamlining one or restructuring it or breaking it and making it better? And I know a lot of people say, Dan, that's crazy. Like, why would you want to break it and make it better? Because I believe if there's something better to be had, we don't do, in this circumstance, our customers any justice by allowing to just work through the broken process, because we're, I don't know if the word would be afraid, Sarah, but we're concerned about saying, hey, Mr. Customer, what do you think, or Mrs. Customer, what do you think about this, this, and this? I think it would streamline. Here's the results I think it can get. Would you want to try it? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I know. I think that that's a really great approach. I mean, at the end of the day, people don't want complicated. When we look at technology and we look at the implementation of some of the technology products out there, some of them are really complicated and they take a lot of time to implement. And that really scares people off. So if we put it into context in regards to technology and implementation, I think it's the same with sales. And I think you also have to be prepared to walk away. I mean, if you
Yes.
can't provide the solution, but you have somebody in your network that could be a better candidate for what they're looking for, I think you've got to be prepared to do that as well. I think that is super important. And we try sometimes to put that square peg in that round hole too many
Mhm.
times just to get the sale. And I think more and more, I mean, I talk about this all the time on my show, collaboration is the future of business. And I think
Mm.
everybody will win when we change the mindset and have that mindset of collaboration.
I'm so glad you brought that up. On Friday, I did a live event with Nicole and Christy. And I know, and
Yes,
I
that's
know the three of y'all
awesome.
are, yeah, yeah. It was actually, you know what? It was kind of that I wanted to call it the planes, trains, and automobile show just for, to kind of for a pun or whatever, because Christy's trains and then Nicole's automobile. And then I'm thinking, well, I'm not planes. So I just called it trains and automobiles. But, in that conversation, Christy said the same thing. She says, it's it's a fact that and as salespeople, please understand this. Your number one goal is to serve the customer, achieve the customer goals, dreams,
Yes.
desires, ambitions, both corporately and from their department.
Mhm.
And if that means saying, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, you need to go to this person because either A, there's no room to move. So many people out there think, oh my God, I'm giving up my customer. They're going to go. Whereas that customer, I believe anyways, and I guess we should add a caveat to this, Sarah, because there are customers out there that will all of a sudden switch for a cheaper price. But in the end, I often say to salespeople, did you really want that customer long term anyways? Can what so we're getting into a whole other topic here because
How
I've
much is
always
it
said,
gonna cost you? I'm just gonna throw that in
yes,
there before you change the subject.
yes.
How much is
No,
that
I
gonna
wasn't.
cost
I was
you?
actually going there. That was awesome. That was not planned, anyone. That was not planned.
We
You're
did
right.
not
How
rehearse
much is it going to cost you,
it. Yeah.
right? How much is that service failure going to cost you? I often say to people, and here's an interesting one. If you've never lost a client, where would you be? It's
Wow,
an
that's an
interesting
interesting
question.
question. I have
Uh-huh.
no idea. You can't put me on the spot like that.
Yeah, well, no, but but that's what I'm saying is it's a question I've asked myself
Yeah.
time and time and time again. And then the secondary question to that is always, why did I lose them?
Yeah, well, I
Now,
was just about to bring that up is you can't learn from something if it hasn't been done. And the only way
exactly,
to move forward and the only as a professional or in business is to learn from, some of those challenges, some of those pitfalls. And if you have never lost a customer, you don't have the opportunity to grow and learn.
exactly, exactly. Now, if we look at why we've lost customers, so I'll talk from both ends because I've been on the asset end and the 3PL end. Okay. On the asset end, I found the majority of customers that we lost. So I was on assets for 5 years,
Mhm.
selling on the asset side, and in that 5 years, you can tell I've done constant review of this in my head. We
I
have
can see the
lost.
wheels turning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it's because I think as a sales rep, if you really ask yourself that, it makes you better,
Yeah.
right? And you could say, okay, here's the loophole, here's the loop, or here's the crater, here's the pothole. Sorry, and I got
Yeah.
to fill it. I got to bridge that gap that's losing me overall long term greatness.
Mhm.
Because I think really as a sales rep, family, a house, a life I want to live, I want to focus on customers that are going to be around long term instead of short term gains, long term pains, because it's a cyclical cycle of sales.
Yeah.
And when I first started in the industry, I focused on anyone that can come through the door, come through the door. And a dollar was a dollar, a transaction was a transaction. And don't get me wrong, at first it was awesome. I mean, we talked about this when we had our first conversation last week. You were 16, I was 17 when we got into the industry. And as a 17-year-old making the kind of money I made, it was unheard of anywhere unless you were like selling dope or something.
Right.
So for me, it was like, this is going to be awesome. And then all of my time, anyways, for me was spent focusing on 3 clients, and I lost 2.
Right.
And I lost them when the exchange rate changed
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I guess I could say, for lack of a better word, my greed was still there. So I wanted to make the margins, where I was making the margins on like that 48, 49% exchange rate, 46, 48, I think. I don't think it got quite up to 49. But, and then when it shifted to that 30, 35, I mean, there's 20% gone. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, no, we need to make that back. So I raised customer rate. So I got greedy. I lost. But what I found was interesting is when I lost the customers, that's when commission breath started really to kick in on my sales calls. And I actually found it harder to make sales in the valley than it was at the peak,
Mm-hmm.
which was actually kind of interesting to realize that, because how many salespeople do you know? How many do I know that are in the worst valley ever? And they're like, I can't make a sale. I don't understand why. And it's shocking. It really
Mm-hmm.
is, because that introspection, that kind of reverse engineering, I guess, of the sales call, of the sales sequence, really would be a massive benefit to anyone that is in sales. Do you not agree?
Yeah, and I think, the interesting part of that is when you do lose a customer, how much time do you spend getting another customer in its
Mhm.
place? Right? And that's kind of what you're talking about, is that you're spending a lot of time trying to replace that customer, when really, if you could have done it maybe a different way in the first place and kept that customer, it's really that long-term foresight rather than that short term, because you're not going to have to work as hard.
I completely agree with that 100%. You're never necessarily taking your foot off the gas, but you're not all the way to the floor redlining the engine consistently, right?
Well, and
You're
you're fostering relationships. I mean, if anybody
mm,
has been in this industry for even 2 minutes, I mean, you know how important, relationships really are, to this business, and how you're selling and how you're getting new customers. And so you really need to foster those relationships so that you can be there when a challenge pops up, and you can have the solution, or you can pass them on to somebody that may have that solution. And at every step, you're solidifying that relationship, which is hugely
mm.
important to your book, and your career.
Yes, I agree. And that comment right there brings us right back to the beginning, where I said, analyze, or look at, figure out why you've lost clients. And as
Mhm.
a broker, the biggest reason I lost clients was the people I selected to use, that I put my image, my credibility, my brand, my customer's image, credibility, and brand on my supplier's shoulders, that completely messed up. And I found that because of that mess up, I realized my relationship wasn't as strong as I thought it was.
Mhm.
Meaning, a lot of the times, when we ask ourselves these questions, we figure out it's more of a transactional relationship
Yeah.
than a solid relationship. And I've got a perfect example. I'm going to share a little story with you. Well, it's actually a big story, and I'll try and make it little, because I know we don't have much time today. Um, I did a lot of pharmaceuticals in my corporate career, and I had a customer for about 16 years. It was my longest standing customer. We were solid left, right, and center. And we went to go pick up in San Leandro, California, and we were going to Brooks, Kentucky, team drivers. And the usual, has to be dry clean, free of odor, usually sometimes acid wash before we go to the shipper. I mean, pristine, because you can imagine when the doors open at major pharmaceutical manufacturers, I mean, it's a very clean environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Drivers opened the doors, went in, no problem, started loading the freight. They left. They get to Brooks, Kentucky. They open the doors, and it smells like a dead body. And everybody's going, "What the hell's going on here?" And everyone was freaking out. Go back and talk to the supplier, and he says, "Dan, I know we're not supposed to, but we loaded pig's feet before. That was the freight we delivered before we delivered your pharmaceuticals. It was the only team we had, and we really wanted to load. So I'll be honest, we didn't tell you, but we didn't, the driver looked and we didn't see. So what had happened was, I guess somehow or another, one of the bags was clipped, and we don't know whether that was with a forklift or just it was clipped and it was
Right.
leaking. So what it did is it leaked into the bevels in the reefer. So couple of things went wrong, and this is from a shipper, carrier, my perspective, everything. I didn't ask what you were delivering. I didn't, because if I would have asked, then the kind of would have come back, and I could have, hopefully my intuition would have kicked in.
Yeah.
Secondly, we have video of the shipper go right to the edge of the trailer. They didn't actually walk in the trailer, so the video from the dock shows them go right to the edge and just look and go, okay, it's clean, because it was pristine except the blood in the bevels, but that's all
Right.
you need. So long story short, what actually happened is they closed the doors at the receivers and said, you need to bring this back to California. But in that whole period of time, we now had 3 days. We need to track that forklift who drove over contamination, and it was close to 150 grand to clean the facility.
Wow.
And then what happened is then there was additional on and on and on and on. I think the end number was close to $327,000 to clean the facility because of a series of errors. And you know what? In the end, I kept the customer, Sarah, because of my relationship. And then that was really the day when this conversation started hitting me. I mean, this conversation just come full circle now, but that was the day when I said, wow, what would happen if every one of my customers I had that relationship with?
Yeah.
Which is why I love your comment, because it's relationship.
Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of people that I train and work with on a monthly basis, and they're trying to develop relationships now. Where I said, your time as a broker to develop relationships was 8 months ago when people were starving for freight. And if you had the freight, that's when you say, listen, this is a I mean, it really is. I mean, if you look at the last 36 months of our industry, holy revolving door, asset broker, who has, the DHL even has that on Freightways. They even have that power index, who's got the power, which is such, that wording just kills me, because it's like, there's no power in a relationship, meaning one-sided, right? There's
Right.
real strength in the togetherness,
Yeah.
but there's no, I have more power. It's like a marriage.
Yeah.
Each person contributing together makes the powerhouse team. No relationships last when one powers over the other. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah.
I,
Makes
I feel like
total
I just
sense. I
started
mean,
babbling.
no, I mean, like, we go back to that word collaboration. What does
Yeah,
that mean? That means winning together.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so part of that, I guess. So let's go back to the sales aspect of it, and bring this full circle back to sales. The part of the sales aspect of it is that collaboration as a whole, to me anyways, is one of the first things I try and find out when I'm qualifying a prospect.
Right.
Is I try and find out, like, are they congruent with the way I think, and the way that I perceive, or the way the customers I'd love to have. I mean, I go back to the conversation we had when we first met last week, where
Yeah.
it was, okay, what's your beliefs? This is my beliefs. What's your beliefs? And then we start talking, and we realize there's so many connections in common,
Yeah.
but it was possible going into that, even after those connections, our visions weren't congruent, which in turn would mean that we're not on the call today. You're not at the High Performance Logistics Sales Summit. I mean, because it was, and that congruency is there, there's going to be business dealings down the road. There's going to be a lot of things we're going to be able to do
Yeah.
because of that congruency, right? And that's really the starting point of all great achievement.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. And right? I mean, when you walk in and you start having a conversation with somebody, and it's not just all about business. I mean, you want to find out about the person. You want to find out, about what they like to do and what they don't like to do. And, you want to be able to make it, you want to have a holistic approach, right? It's the same when we're
Mm,
looking at
I like
talent
that.
and supply chain. You want to look at people from a holistic perspective. That doesn't just mean their performance on a day-to-day basis at the job. It means, like, what are their passions outside of the job? How can you incorporate some of those passions that they have outside of what they're doing for you with what they're doing for you in the business? And the more that you can do that, the more success that everybody is going to have, because they're going to enjoy their job a lot more. You're going to be able to come up with new creative, innovative ways, maybe new creative revenue streams, by taking a look at people individually and holistically, rather than, I think we've painted a brush too many times over people as, a pack, right? And how
Mhm.
everybody is the same if they're this, or everybody's the same if they're that. It's not true, and it hasn't been true, and it's not going to be true moving forward.
No, I agree, and you have those two aspects of as a whole, and then personally, it's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and determination and desire that really take us to that next level.
Yeah.
I've been asking so many people over the last couple of weeks, you know, can you do or do you believe one day 25 experts can completely change your sales for 2021? That's the equation. If you can believe that mathematical equation, the High Performance Summit is for you. If
Mhm.
you can't, you're kind of wasting your time, right? I
Mhm.
looked at it and I said, from a sales rep's perspective, from a sales leader in our industry, you got to have that drive, that determination, because I mean, as well as I do, the list of people at this event, it is going to be a large fire hose of knowledge,
It absolutely
education,
is.
strategy, tools. I mean, you're going to have to be thirsty to come into it.
Yeah.
But if you're that thirsty, you can change everything in your life. And
Mhm.
I believe it as little as 90 days, but massive results over 12 months.
Yeah.
You know, none of it comes without those four key factors. It really
Yeah.
doesn't.
Well, and you've got to be careful of where you're spending your time now too, right? I mean,
Oh,
there's so much digital content. There's so many digital events. There's so much information coming at you on a day-to-day basis. So what is it that you want to learn? What is it that your goals are for 2021?
yeah.
And break that down and, move backwards from there. What do you need to do to make that happen? What do you need to learn? Who do you need to learn from? Who do you wanna take a look at who is doing what you wanna be doing that you can emulate and learn from so that you can get there as well?
I love that. That's awesome. And that's really the cornerstone of coaches, the cornerstone of training, the cornerstone of everything we do. Because
Yeah.
I know even on Let's Talk Supply Chain, I mean, your conversations help so many people understand supply chain as a whole,
Yeah.
understand the complexities of it. I've often said, and I love your opinion on this, I've often said to so many sales reps, said, well, I'm new in the industry, who's going to listen to me? I said, in 3 months, you can have more knowledge, education, and understanding of this
Yes.
industry than people that have been in it for 5 years.
Yep.
Like you really can. There's no limitation. I've been a firm believer forever that anyone can reach the heights that so many people think, oh, only gifted people can reach it in our industry. I mean, it's the best industry on the planet. Everybody that's watching this is probably sick of me saying everything we see is touch to truck. So there's
Yeah.
no other industry in my perception that has the abundance of our industry. If
Yeah.
you decide to make that what you want, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. And I I love this industry. I've been in this industry for a very long time. I get messages all the time from people that have said that they've just gotten into supply chain or gotten into logistics, and they listen to the show and they've learned so much from the show that it really
Mm.
propels them in their career. And that, to me, I mean, if we can just change one person or help one person, that makes it all worth it.
1000%. You, the the biggest smile comes on my face when I get a text from a student or a text from a group and said, I tried this, and this, and it worked. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I had made it so complex when it was so simple. And supply chain is getting very complex these days when you look at it. I mean, I've often said, let's look at the logistics of the vaccine, the
Yeah.
COVID vaccine, right? Just the logistics of that. Awesome. To me, that's awesome. That's an opportunity. Some people it might scare them. To me, it's an opportunity. I mean, any which way to get involved, I'm in. Just for sure, because the education, what we can learn from that
Yeah, the
is
stories that are
incredible.
gonna come out of it are
You
gonna be
know,
crazy.
oh yeah, the marketing that's going to come out of it. I mean, the people that are going to be involved, their main marketing platform. The government trusted us to do this. You should trust us too. And whoever's going to use that, you can just send me a royalty check later because that was really good. That was really good.
On the
Uh,
fly.
hey, I just came up with it, and y'all are welcome to use it. Just I'll DM me, and I'll give you my address for a royalty check when that starts flowing because that was pretty good. But I mean, absolutely. If I was, I would definitely market that, hands
Mhm.
down, hands
Yeah.
down. Every pharmaceutical company would be getting that. Anyone involved in PPE, pharmaceutical, whatever, because that's huge. That's borrowing credibility to the max, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
are what are some
absolutely.
of the what are some of the challenges or some of the other things that people get in touch with you that you'd like to share about supply chain? Like, what are some of the
Mhm.
other real deep questions that people contact you about, Sarah?
So I think a lot of times, especially right now with all of the digital content that's out there at the moment, people
Mhm,
want to be listening to stuff that they can relate to. So,
mhm,
what are the challenges that other supply chain professionals or other supply chain leaders are having right now? And how have they solved it, or how are they solving it? Or what are some of the things that they are trying to do to solve it? People are no longer looking necessarily for too much high level. They really want to dig deeper and get to understand what it's been like for other people because honestly, I mean, it's been a bit isolating for everybody, obviously,
mhm,
not only from the working from home, being isolated from your teams, maybe being isolated from the workplace as well, because not
mhm,
everybody has been able to go into work. And so, there's LinkedIn and there's different ways to really contact people but do they do that, right? So I think we need to provide a platform, and I've done that on a number of occasions to really talk about what people are going through and how they're getting over some of those challenges, just to bring it to that level of, yeah, I'm having that challenge too, and that worked for you, amazing. I am going to look into that as well. I think the other
mhm,
thing, supply chain leaders are tasked with so much right now. I mean,
mhm,
empathy, the mental health of their employees, which was something that was always on the horizon, but not really something that was in your day to day, and making sure that
mhm,
everybody is okay mentally working from home, that kind of thing. And then they're also taking a look at their supply chain strategies, manufacturing. Are we going to keep manufacturing in China? Are we going to explore and diversify our manufacturing? Are we going to bring some of that manufacturing closer to home? And are we going to manufacture for local markets rather than global markets as we've done pre-COVID? So, there's a lot of different conversations that are happening, a lot of conversations around talent. How do you find talent? There's a bit of a disconnect between what HR is looking for and what the supply chain leader is looking for. And how do we bring
mm,
that together? The knowledge gaps. Right? The next generation that's coming into supply chain. How do we get them into supply chain? How do we get them excited? How do we give them the experience that they need, that the corporations are asking them for when they're looking at hiring them? I mean, where are these internships? Where are these apprenticeships? And then again, the tribal knowledge that's on its way out of the industry. How do we capture that? How do we bring that into the organization, pair that up with the next generation, and keep that experience and that knowledge going? So I think there's a lot, right? There's a lot of different
mm,
things that we're talking about. I think also, diversity and inclusion, sustainability, those are really, really huge topics right now.
mhm,
We just started a new series on Let's Talk Supply Chain called Blended, which is about diversity and inclusion. And we're bringing people from all walks of life to talk about what diversity and inclusion actually means. Like the first episode was about the words. What words can we use? What words can't we use? How do we address this kind of situation? The second one was, stories and impact. We really need to get to know people on a personal level as to what they've been through in their careers and what was that impact. If I said something to you What was the impact on your life? And it could be an impact of a week, it could be an impact of a couple of years. And it's hugely important that we start bringing together these stories and really understanding what our actions and our words mean to those around us. So a
You
lot
know,
to unpack there.
that
I know. I'm sorry, but
no, and I mean, you
there's
know
a lot
what? A
going on.
ton to unpack. Absolutely. But, it's so true. And I'll start with the story part. Because I got into this industry so young, the owner of the brokerage company I first worked for, I remember him telling me, you can't go to meetings. You can't go see people. I said,
Mm,
why? He says, you still smell like pee. He goes, like, you can't do it. And I mean, as funny as it was, he goes, think of it like this. You're 17. You're talking to a traffic manager who maybe has a 19-year-old kid that's a complete screw up. Do you think he's ever going to listen to you
mm,
when it comes to his freight? And I thought in my head, I'm like, you're right. Except I carried that forward
mm,
till I was almost 40.
right.
And that's crazy. Some of you might think it's crazy, but I
It's
literally
not.
did. I carried that. I'm not old enough. I'm not at the point where I can do this. I'm not at the point where people will listen to me. I need some gray hair. Or I mean, all of these crazy things
Mhm.
were happening. And the other day I was at a friend's place who owns a large excavating company. And he's not, I think he just turned 30, and he's got dozens of pieces of equipment, does big business, really dedicated to his craft. And we're having the conversation. And he says, oh, me too. He goes, like, I started this when I was 17. He goes, and then when I was 21, I went out on my own, and everybody said, you're not going to make it. You're just a kid. You don't understand business. He goes, so I learned, I educated myself. And I waited till probably mid 30s to do that instead of doing it at 17, because I was under this fictitious perspective that
Yeah.
I'm young, I'm
Yeah.
young, I'm young. And you see a lot of really great leaders in the industry that I wouldn't doubt have the same opinion. Is
Mhm.
who's really going to take, I'm young. I go in, perfect example. You walk into a boardroom. I have 27 years in the industry. I know you're right around that same point with me. But in that perspective, you go and sit down with somebody that's got 40 years in the industry. What
Mhm.
is your first that and as human nature almost, what's that first thought is, oh boy, this person's gonna eat me up. But
I've
and that's
never
why
had that thought, but I can
you
see
never did?
why you would. I can
Yeah,
see why you would, and I
yeah,
think, what needs to come out of that is how do we support that next generation? I mean, if we take a
yeah.
look at conferences as they were pre-COVID,
Hmm.
who attended those conferences? Who did companies pick to go to those conferences? Were they the young up and comers? Were they the young next generation to give them an opportunity to learn from some of the sessions, to have a chance to learn how to network and really get in front of people?
Great
No,
question. I don't know.
it's not. It's
Was it
not.
the
They
old
don't.
was it the old dogs kind of thing?
Yeah, for the most part.
Mm,
And I think, where we, if we want to foster that innovation, we want to foster that creativity, we really need to get behind people in our organizations that want to learn and that want to have these experiences. Right? So, how do we do that? Well, we need to support them. When we have in-person conferences and, who do we send? Do we send the same people every single time? Maybe not. Do we
mm.
send the next generation so that they can go and listen to experts and really learn more and understand and come back with innovative, fresh new ideas? Maybe we do.
Well, you know what? I could tell you, I listen to everyone and anyone. When I have a new student come in, when somebody reaches out to me and says, I'm brand new in this, I say, tell me, tell me all about what you see, how you see it, and why you see it like that.
Yeah.
And we can learn no matter the tenure of our industry, how long we've been in it, how
Oh, yeah.
much we research, how much we study, how much we transform. We can always learn from the next person. And when we're open to that, again, it's funny how these conversations go full circle.
Mhm.
Collaborative, come back. It's not just
Yeah.
collaboration with your customer, it's collaboration with your supplier, collaboration with your team. Somebody on LinkedIn just said, interesting, have to have confidence and be prepared with a respectful attitude. Absolutely. And that confidence is really the shattering point. I look at so many reps throughout this year. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where they've said, I'm second guessing if I'm good at this. I'm
Mhm.
second guessing if this is an industry I want to be in.
Yeah.
And I continually say to them, try not to. Actually, at first I said don't, but then I realized I can't tell people how to think. So it was more of a try not to. You're not the only one.
Mhm.
This industry is it's going through a shift. It's going through a pivot. And, you and I were both around in 08, 09, when
Yes.
the bottom of the economy fell out. And,
That's when I
you know,
started in sales. That was the
yeah,
best
well,
year I ever had.
there you go.
The
And,
best year.
it's crazy because the word, the word that came out was value,
Mhm.
that I saw come out of that
Yep,
shift
it's true.
in the
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
so true.
value. How do you add value? And then
Mhm.
obviously that word in my opinion, got way overused when it comes to value, because everybody was saying, well, we add value, we add value. And I'm saying, okay, well, what is value? Well, value is this, this, and this. And that's where I often say, well, that isn't what value means to me.
Exactly, it
So
means different things to different people. That's the
yes,
holistic approach, really. And
yeah,
going back to what they're talking about, the respectful attitude. I mean, if you can learn from somebody, ask questions. I mean, I think
mm,
a lot of times that we feel that we are putting our guard down, right? By asking questions and being a little bit more curious and having to learn from those people in the room that have been around for that long. And I think we can't be afraid to ask those questions. If they say something that you don't know or understand, ask,
mhm,
because that's the only way you're going to learn. Don't sit there and nod your head like you
mhm,
know what it is. If you don't know what it is, just ask. And I think we have to bring those walls down and really understand that somebody is in a vulnerable position when they are asking those questions, but that they're
mhm.
curious and that they want to
Yeah,
learn and that they're showing their authenticity and showing that you can trust them because they don't know what it is and they're asking you for help.
I'm so glad you went there, because here, here's another way to think about it. When you're speaking with somebody and you're sharing information, advising them, when they get that glaze over their eyes, we know,
I've seen it.
we know,
I've
and
seen it.
and, and absolutely, and you're saying, okay, you got it right, and you're like, uh-huh, and in your head you're going, no, you don't have it. Why do we always assume when we're in those positions, and people that do that always assume, oh no, they have no idea, I have no idea what I'm talking about? Okay, good, I'm just gonna, when we do, our intuition picks that up. And especially now, like we're doing,
I
we'll get
like
to
that
those in
one.
just a
The
second.
only bad question is the one not asked. I like that.
Yes,
Everybody can see who
absolutely,
these
that is
people are.
awesome. Yeah, well, it just says LinkedIn user, and I don't know if that's because I'm on the phone, uh or if I'm just
So on LinkedIn, if it does come up LinkedIn user, there is a way to
mhm.
change that. I have it on my live streams where we tell people how to change that, but it's part of your settings. And I think it's just
Okay,
a
so
matter of
you'll have
putting
to share with
settings.
me when we go off air for that.
I
um
will.
100%. So that's the thing, right? Is we often, as sales reps, never put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and
Mhm.
think to ourselves, in the last conversation I had with Frank, when I asked Frank about blah blah blah, and Frank looked at me like a deer in the headlights, he played it off pretty good that he knew what I was talking about, but in the end, I knew he didn't. And
Right.
that intuition, especially with Zoom and everything going on now, for the last 8, 9 months, I've been on camera more than I've been on the phone.
Yep.
Just, it's the way we're doing it. So
Yeah.
now you're staring at a customer and they're going, okay, do you got that, Dan? And you're like, uh-huh. Yeah, I got it. I'm good. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have it. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, and so
Uh,
the LinkedIn user is Rhonda. Awesome, Rhonda. Thanks so much for joining us. I love all of your comments and questions. Global Trans
Global
Director of
trends.
Fitness and Wellness. Look at Global Trans taking fitness and wellness all the way to
That's
the next degree.
that's essential.
Mhm.
You can't be at peak performance if you're eating fast food 5 days a week, I believe, anyways. And
Yeah.
that might be called, somebody might call me out on that. I have a feeling, but I look at it and I say, peak performance, getting ready, coming into the day with a set goal. What do I want to learn today? What can one of my mentors, because I'm a big, you and I spoke about this again last week. I'm a huge believer in coaches, in training. Like, I've got 3 coaches that I work with now. One of my coaches says, as much as people don't want to face challenges every day, what if we were to think about, what obstacles could we face today? And it's funny because this morning, as I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what might go wrong today? And I'm not trying to be one of those put things going wrong out into the atmosphere, but what might go wrong and how can I address it as my best self? And it's funny because I said, okay, well, I've got 3 lives today. Almost back. I've never done 3 lives in a day, but it just so happens most of my scheduling lives were today.
This is my second.
Yeah, it's fun.
today.
I love it.
It is
And
fun.
I said, okay, so what can go wrong? Okay, my computer can overload, my cam link can get hot, and never once did I think to myself, my internet can completely shut down. Right?
Well,
Like, we had power outages. You were part of the big storm we had last week, and it's like, okay, my link, my internet's going to be fine. And as I'm looking at my router, it's still flashing. But how could we do it? We just did it with this. So there's always an opportunity to think outside the box and fix things that are happening real time, I guess, is where I was going with that.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Derek
Probably.
just popped up and said, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
That's it,
What he
Mr.
was trying to
Staples.
say. I mean, he just put
Yeah.
that into context. Thank you, Derek.
Derek and I go way back, and it's funny. Derek and I used to drive to and from work together all the time, and I would talk for about 15 minutes in Babylon. He'd go, "Oh yeah, blah blah," and it was like, yeah, he just summed it up. So he's still doing it.
There you go. You
Yeah,
need a Derek
every
in
day.
the audience every single time.
Yes, he's been in the audience quite a few times. He's got quite a few LinkedIn groups that he runs and manages, and he's a dear friend and a truly an awesome guy. He's a character. Yes, you are, Staples. But it is that 20 years. He says 20 years. Yeah, I can't believe that. Wow, I feel old.
I know, it's when you start looking at your friendships and how long you've been friends with them, you're like, oh, goddamn.
Yes, it's like, really? Because I feel like I'm 24 and I didn't know you when I was 4. But yeah,
Right?
it's
Exactly.
it's crazy. It's crazy. So, I mean, you had a lot there that you unpacked. That collaborative network. I agree. I think kind of if we think of it like drivers, right? To me, I'm part of quite a few groups, and drivers to me is probably one of the most under glorified job ever, I guess. And I don't know if that's necessary. Where I'm getting at with that is, we wouldn't have food, we wouldn't have deliveries, we wouldn't have all these cool things if it wasn't for truck drivers. Yet I can still remember when I first went to the asset-based company that I moved to Ontario to work with. I remember the owner saying, "You got to come on trips with me. So we're going to go for like a week or 2. We're going to go on trips." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, let's do it." And Sarah, I was blown away at how drivers were treated. Not only at shippers, where I now look at it and I say, your product does nothing for anyone until it gets in the customer's hands. You don't have a sale. You don't get to market. You don't get to sell more product until it gets in the customer's hands so they can consume it, use it, so on and so forth. And just treated like dirt at the shipper, treated like dirt at customs, to the point I remember I was standing there and I had my foot up on the wall and I was just kind of leaning against the wall. And this guy is screaming, and I'm looking at the owner of the company. I go, wow, somebody's in trouble. Lo and behold, the customs agent's this far from my face. Now, that obviously will never happen, post-COVID, but he's this far from my face. And I turn around and he's going, "Get your foot off the wall." But he was saying driver, driver, driver. So I never realized it. Now, I do understand from the market that it has gotten better, but we need an influx of new drivers in this industry as well. And I think that marketing needs to change. That marketing, that this is a prestigious job, in my opinion. you keep economies moving as a truck driver.
Yeah, and I think, I think that there's some good organizations that's helping with that. I think there's some organizations that are helping women actually get into the industry and become drivers. Hillary out of, I think she's in Barrie. She's doing a great thing and starting her business and looking to encourage other women to get into trucking and to be truck
Mm-hmm.
drivers. You've got the Women in Trucking Association. Hope White
Boss
is also
lady.
yeah, Hope White is also doing a lot out of Atlanta in this regard as well. But I'm going to take it one step further. And
Please.
most people have not probably heard of this, but there is a huge, huge challenge right now with seafarers. And so
Mm-hmm.
as much as you say that, truckers and they are important to the supply chain, I think there's a lot of people that are important to the supply chain from one end to the other. Seafarers are
Yes.
another one that right now during the pandemic are not being treated very well. They've been on vessels for anywhere from 6 to 18 months without seeing their families. They're
You know
having
what? You're absolutely right. 92% of everything we touch over the road has come from a vessel.
yeah. And
Never thought of
so
that, Sarah.
yeah, and
Hmm.
they're not able to see their families. They're not able to get off at port. They're not able to get off the vessel. And there's a lot of mental health issues. There's a lot of challenges that are going on for the seafarers right now as well. And so I think as important as it is to talk about the treatment of truck drivers and elevating that voice and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
they're being taken care of as well, I think we also have to elevate the voice for seafarers because they are like they're also part of what drives the economy and gets products from A to B, from overseas into North America and vice versa, and all over the world essentially. And they're being stuck on these vessels and they're not being treated very well. And there's a couple of places out there. There's a change.org, I think, for seafarers, where people are, signing the petition so that we can get a better way of life for these seafarers while we're going through this pandemic, while we're going through COVID. There's a couple of other people that are working on a couple of different things. And so I just wanted to bring that to light as well, because, seafarers are just as important and they're not having an easy time of it right now either. And we need to really show our support and rally around them too.
1,000%. And it's kind of embarrassing that I never even thought of them.
Hmm.
It's
Well, it's
that
not something that
final mile, I guess.
yeah, it's
You
not
know,
something that we really talk about. It's not something that we
no.
even really think about. But if you think about global trade, right, it
Hmm.
involves truckers, it involves airlines. I mean, the airline industry is suffering as well, right? You've got
Oh, Hugh, yeah,
pilots, you've
yeah.
got stewardesses and stewards and the people that are in the airline industry that aren't able to do their jobs as they used to as it used to be, they're
Hmm.
suffering as well, and we're all interconnected in the supply chain, right? It goes from
100%.
sourcing, procurement, manufacturing, transportation, where you've got the air and the ocean freight living, you've got the distribution, the final mile, the trucking in between there. Like, we're all interconnected and there's so many different parts of what we do in supply chain that have been brought to light in the last 6 months, and people that we haven't really talked about before, but that we do need to bring to light because they're the unsung heroes of supply chain
Hmm.
and making sure that people have food and supplies right now during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean the ripple effect from Dean Crook and I were talking about it. Dean's a principal analyst at DAT. We talked about it on a live a week ago or so, where that rock that was thrown into the pond has changed the shoreline forever.
Hmm.
It's 92% of everything we touch on an OTR perspective has been on a ship before we touch it, which is a crazy number.
Yeah.
I'm actually embarrassed that I never even thought of them on the ship not being able to get off at port. I mean, that's huge. I mean, that is, yeah. I could see how the mental side of it would be just drastic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it really is an issue right now.
Yeah,
So,
so we've got a bunch of comments. I think around 90% or a little more of the goods come from vessels. Yes, absolutely. That that was some of the data that Dat shared with me, was 90% comes from the vessels, because it actually, it creates, I mean, obviously minus a lot of the produce and stuff we grow, obviously doesn't, but if you think of the global network, both to and from, gosh, that's a long time to be on a ship without having to get off, without, with conditions the way they are. And wow, that's crazy. You sent me on a whole other path there, Sarah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
No,
But
no, no. I mean,
we
it's
need to
good. It's just,
bring these conversations to light and make sure that
yeah.
people are, thinking about, everybody that's sort of going through, and we're all going through different things around this
Mhm.
time, right? We all have different challenges, but there are some of the unsung heroes, and of course our healthcare workers and everything like that, but also
Yes.
in the supply chain, supporting our community and really understanding what some people are going through. And that's why, I
Yeah.
mean, this doesn't help seafarers, but every Friday I do a buddy check. I do a buddy check post on LinkedIn to just check in with the community and see how their week was and how they're feeling, and giving them a safe space to say, "Hey, I'm not okay this week. This week was really, really hard. But
Mhm.
I'm going to rest up this weekend and be ready to go for next week." And I think it's really important right now that we check in on people and check in on each other, and just, make sure, even if they're not willing to even say that in a comment, just so that they know people are thinking about them. And that makes a huge
Yep.
difference.
100%. I mean, even just that check-in, I think would
Mhm.
change a lot of people's days.
Yeah.
It's, I've often said, if we put ourselves in the other person's shoes, it gives us a completely different perspective,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we look at just some of the companies, like some of the big companies that service restaurants.
Mhm.
We think this, what about the restaurant owners? And yes, they're small businesses. The restaurant owners, I feel bad for them. A
Yeah.
lot of them, especially from where you and I are at in Toronto and Peel and all these other places, just spent tens of thousands of dollars on heaters, creating these outdoor environments because they thought,
Get
okay, we
back
can
up
get
and
more
running.
time. And then now we're in red zone again, lockdown. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just done.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you sit there and you go, wow, uh, so we talked about the word that came out of 2008 2009 was value, and I think
Mhm.
the word that's come out of 2020 is pivot.
Or
Like
perspective. Like, really
perspective.
understanding, what other people have gone through. Like,
Mhm.
I wrote a post about this 2 weeks ago, was, all of our shows are coming back online. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I will keep it very short.
It's okay, no,
But
it's fine.
all of our shows are coming back online, and the shows are really showcasing to us what different people in different roles have been going through this pandemic. I sat through the first episode of This Is Us, and I ugly cried through the whole thing, because they talked about Black Lives Matter. They talked about allyship. They talked about, they really put it into perspective as to what people are going through with the different challenges that we're having in the last 6 months. And there has been a lot. This last 6 months has uncovered, dug up, and started so many different conversations. I mean, you've got Black Lives Matter, you've got the election in the States, you've got COVID and what healthcare workers are going through on a daily basis, losing the number of people that they're losing, that they wouldn't even consider that
Mhm.
number in their whole career happening in 6 months. I mean,
Yep.
it just really goes to show, and it's television. I get it, it's not
Mhm.
necessarily real, but right now it's what's putting it into perspective, at least for me, as to what other people are going through, because we all live in our bubble. We're all going through our own challenges, and things affect us differently, but being able to take a look at it from a broader perspective and really understanding the different roles and what people are going through just creates, that empathy, and to sit back and be like, "Wow."
You know, the one image that kind of, when you're speaking, the one image I'm thinking of that shifted my perspective was in New York, that big trench they dug, and they
Mhm,
just piled box after box after box after
mhm.
box after box of dead bodies from when COVID really hit them hard. Um, that was probably the first time I stopped and went, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
Like, "Whoa!"
Mhm.
The only other time you've seen pictures of that is like Auschwitz and all these
Yeah.
horrible things in history. Yes, compassion is so important. You're absolutely right, and it's shifting that perspective. Like you think of you making a sales call to New York City. Hey, how are you today? Right? Because we typically do that as salespeople. Hey, beautiful day today, right? Nobody cares about the weather right now. Like
Yeah.
we empathy and all these things, and Gary Vee talks about it all the time, right? Empathy, empathize with people, understand what they're going through, and not just BS empathy, empathize with them,
Yeah.
and it's what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. I know we've come right to our time limit, and I think we can go on for about 2 hours here longer. Amazing. But listen, for all of you listening and watching, if you've gotten to this point, I urge you. Sarah is an expert on the expert panel at the High Performance Logistics Sales Summit. Head over, register, get your free digital ticket. We have a goal, and everyone in the summit on every panel is helping to achieve that goal. And you want to talk collaboration. I've never had a collaborative event like this one. We want to put 3,000 sales reps in the audience digitally to this event. Be part of the movement. This is just, I would say, Sarah, for lack of a better word, this is just touching the surface of some of the strategy, tools, and conversations that's going to happen at the summit.
Yeah, I would agree.
Perfect. All right, everybody, have a fantastic day. We're off to our next lives. I know this is the second one for you in a row, Sarah, and now I'm off to another 2. So enjoy the day, everybody. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Me. Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care.
We'll see you at the summit.